Hello, everyone, and this is the recorded lecture on the topic concepts of state and government. So, in this lecture, we will be talking about the basic concepts on the state and the government, such as what the state is and what the government is, and some basic elements and components of these two uh, terms, these two concepts. Okay, so let's proceed. Okay, so what do we mean or what are we referring to when we say the state? Okay, so take note that the state can mean a lot of different things based on the context. So, of course, we are talking about the state in the political context. Okay, so a state is a community of persons which is more or less numerous. So again, our focus here is it's a collective of people. It's a group of people. But of course, so there has to be a little bit more indicators. Okay, so it's a group of people that is permanently occupying a definite portion of territory. Okay, so the people has to be situated, has to be uh, living, it has to be occupying in a permanent territory. Okay. 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 I'm sorry about that. Okay. So ayan, so these group of people, so to be considered a state, so they have to be permanently residing in a definite portion of territory, meaning so they have to be permanently living there, and that territory has to be defined. Okay, so it's the territory, the definition of the territory uh, must not be vague or must not be unclear. Okay, for example, when you say the territory that we own is as far as what we can see, so that is what we own. Okay, so that's unclear because if you move from one spot to another and then you apply that same definition, di ba, it's unclear. So there has to be something definitive about that territory. For example, uh, uh, in a span of 50-kilometer radius from this specific longitude or latitude. So yun. So it has to be definite. It has to be specific. Okay. All right. Uh, Aside from that, another indicator of that state is that it has to be a group of people residing in a specific, permanently residing in a definite territory. And they also should have a government of their own to which the people render obedience. Okay, so there has to be an agency or a body, okay, that facilitates the peaceful living or the orderly living of the people within that territory. And the people should acknowledge this authority. Okay, how do they acknowledge? Of course, by obeying whatever policies this government or this body of people, this agency, uh, is uh, is promulgating. Okay, because without obedience, the people are not acknowledging the authority of this particular government. Therefore, that agency is non-existent, okay, in the perspective of the people. So, again, obedience must be rendered. And lastly, okay, so it's a group of people, okay, permanently residing in a definite territory, okay, having a government which is acknowledged by the people, and these group of people must enjoy freedom from external control. Okay, meaning these people should be living their own lives out of their own freedom, okay, out of basically how they want to live their lives without anybody from the outside, okay, without anybody from the outside influencing how they live their lives. Okay. All right. So to summarize, so the state is more or less a community of persons permanently residing in a specific territory, having a government which they render obedience to, and living their lives, okay, without influence from other people, from outside people. Okay, so it's a bit lengthy, but so that is what we refer to when we say state in the political context. Okay, so what are the elements of the state? So basically, when you break down the definition of the state, okay, into terms that constitute the definition, you have the elements. So without these elements, so the state is not existent. Okay, so all four elements has to be existent. So you have people, the territory, government, and sovereignty, or sometimes synonymous to independence. Okay, so without one, okay, so the state will not be complete, or basically it will not exist. Okay, you can have a people, a territory, and a government, but without sovereignty, you cannot call yourself a state. Okay, you can also have a people, a territory, a sovereignty, but without a government. So yeah, so it's not a state. Okay, there are people, there are groups of people uh, who has their own people, yeah, the group of people who has their own government and sovereignty, but they do not have a permanent territory. Okay, so again, we cannot call that a state. Okay, so again, for all four elements must be present uh, for an entity to be considered a state. Okay, so yun nga, you need to have the people. Okay, so you need to have a specific territory. Okay, so you need to have a government that you acknowledge, whose authority is you acknowledge, and you need to have sovereignty. Right. Thus, we have certain points for reflection. For example, one point for reflection is that having said that the Philippines, that a state needs to exercise or needs to possess sovereignty, or needs to be free from external control. Okay. Do you think that the Philippines can be considered, essentially, can the Philippines be considered uh, a state? Okay. So again, this is a point for reflection. So you have to justify if you say that the Philippines can be considered a state. Okay. In in assessing its level of sovereignty. So if you say yes, how can you justify it? If you say no, so again, how will you explain it? All right. Okay. So how do we distinguish a state, political concept, context from a nation? Okay. So the state is a political concept, while the nation is an ethnic concept. Okay. So because you can say, you can refer to the Philippine state and the Filipino nation, but sometimes you get the interpretation or the meaning interchangeably. Halimbawa, you're referring to the Filipino nation, but what you're saying, or what you're actually expressing is the state. Okay, and vice versa. You may be referring to the state, but what you are expressing is the nation. Okay. So when you refer to the group of people in the political context, okay, so you refer to the state. When you refer to the people in the cultural context, so you refer to the nation. Okay. So a nation is a group of people. So again, that's their similarity. So the state and the nation both talk about a group of people. However, this is how they are going to be differentiated. So the nation refers to a group of people which is bound together by certain characteristics such as common social origin, language, customs, and traditions. In short, it's a group of people bound together by common culture. Okay? Whereas in the state, it's a group of people bound together by the territory, the government, and sovereignty. Okay, it's highly political as compared to a nation. So you have a more cultural context. Okay, that's why, strictly speaking, the Filipino state is different from the Filipino nation. Okay, you can be part of the nation but not necessarily part of the state. Okay, at the same time, you can also be part of the Filipino state while not being part of the Filipino nation. What am I referring to? For example, uh, we have a case of a foreigner, okay, who acquired Filipino citizenship, okay, and is residing in the Philippines. Okay, so is he a part of the Filipino nation? Okay, point for reflection. Ayan. So another question, is he part of the Philippine state? Okay, is he part of that group of people which is bound together by the territory, the government, and independence, so our sovereignty? Okay, so these are some of the reflections that we have with regards to the difference between the state and the nation. Another example, let's say we have an OFW, a Filipino, okay, as in born and raised in the Philippines, but he was able to migrate, for example, to Canada, for example. Ayan. Okay, so is he part of the Filipino nation? Is he part of that group of people which is bound together by common culture? Or is he part, on another question, is he part of the Filipino state? Is he still part of the state of the Philippines? So, ayan, these are some of the reflections that we can have with regards to the question, between the difference of the state and the nation. Okay, so the people, the nation or the group of people believe that they are one and distinct from others. So you consider yourself a nation if you feel, if you believe, if you know that you are distinct, that you are different, that you are unique from other nations. Okay, so you cannot call yourself uh, nation B, okay, as different from nation A, if you have lots of commonalities, okay, and you cannot really distinguish the the people from nation B from nation A. Okay, so there has to be something distinct. There has to be something uh, different between you and other people for you to be considered a nation. Okay, so again, recap: state is more, excuse me, state is more of a political concept, and we use this term in the political context. Okay, because it's the group of people bound together by territory, bound together by the government, okay, and their sovereignty from other people. Okay, well, the nation is more of a cultural concept. Okay, we use this term in the cultural context. Okay, so yun nga, it still refers to a group of people, but the the grouping is based on their common culture. Okay, so regardless of the territory, okay, regardless of what government you are following or you are obeying, as long as you belong to that common culture, then you are part of that nation. Okay. Now, how do we distinguish the state from the government? So again, since uh, what we are referring to is the state and the government, can we use them? Are they the same? Are they referring to the same? Are they? Can we use them interchangeably in essays or in write-ups? Okay. So the government is only the agency. It's the group. It's that body of people through which the state articulates its will. Okay. It's that body within the state. Okay. Through which the state makes what uh, makes reality whatever it wants. Okay. So the state, if the state wants something, they make it a reality. They attain it by means of the government. Okay. Let's put it into an example. For example, the state, of course, the group of people, that body of people. Okay. Okay. For example, the state. Uh, uh, in order to survive, of course, they need food. Okay. How will the state procure the food? Okay. So it's the government. For example, this finger represents the government or the agency. Okay. So the government will decide how the state is going to uh, how the state is going to uh, consistently produce the food for their survival. Okay? Because if the entire population of the state will come up with ways on how they are going to procure their food, then they are not a state because, di ba? Uh, if you imagine, they're living independently from others. Okay? They can be considered individual states. Okay? Kasi their obedience lies in different entities, not in a single entity. This one. Okay? So, the government is different in that it's just a representative of the people. Okay? So, they are the ones who will make sure that the state will gain or will receive whatever it needs, whatever it wants, okay, for its survival, for its progress. Okay? That we're talking in an ideal state, in an ideal sense, okay, that the government exists, okay, to ensure that the entirety of the people living within the state, okay, will receive whatever it is that they need to survive. Okay. Now, kaya lang ayon, sometimes we interchangeably use the term government with the term state. Now, uh, strictly speaking, it's not necessarily prohibited. So okay lang naman. It's okay to interchangeably use the state from the government. Okay, in essays, for example, yun nga, to avoid redundancy and repetition. So for example, in the first statement, you use the government, and then you use the state. Some people accept that. Okay, and there's no law prohibiting there's no grammatical law prohibiting people from avoiding that. Okay, but it's more important that we know now how to distinguish the two. Okay, so the state is the overall group of people, while the government is just a representative of those group. It's just a group within the group. Okay, it's the agency through which the state uh, attains whatever it needs, whatever it wants to survive and to progress. Okay. All right. So I come across this picture while I was browsing through 9gag a few years ago, and uh, it's an image that actually uh, makes one reflect about the nature of the government and the relationship with the people. Okay, because sometimes we see that the government is or we sometimes have this notion that the government is all powerful. Government. The government is all powerful. That it's the strongest entity within the state. Pero yun nga, we don't realize how powerful the people, the ordinary citizens are, especially if they come together and unite. Okay, so just an image that we can use for a point of reflection. Okay. Anyway, all right. So how do states originate? Okay, how do political states start? Okay, so we won't really uh, delve too much on this, pero here are some theories on how states form or start. Okay, so you have divine right. Okay, you have necessity or force, you have paternalistic, or you have social contract. Okay, so divine right theory states that a state is formed through the intervention or through the influence of a deity or a supreme being or a supernatural being. Okay, for example, mayroong entity or supernatural being uh, that mandated the person to unite the people and to form a group or form a state, etc., etc. Okay, and the people will revere that supernatural being, etc., etc. Okay, so that's one theory. Okay, so for example, if this is Moses or Abraham, and now how the second theory is by force or by means of necessity, in that a new state is formed. Okay, when one state tries to conquer, okay, or has successfully conquered or invaded another state, okay, and the invaded state or the conquered state has no choice but to join that state in order for it to survive. Okay, because this talks more about number one, the enlargement of the group of people. Kasi yun nga, you now occupy or those people that you have defeated or that you have conquered are now part of your state, and the enlargement of your territory. Kasi 'di ba, if these two are occupying different territories, okay, they can already be considered states. Okay? Kaya lang if you enlarge the territory, if you made it bigger, okay, if you join the territories together, then that is now the formation of a different state. Okay? That's why if you remember in the study of civilizations, uh, we oftentimes uh, we oftentimes divide the periodization of a particular civilization based on the enlargement of its territory. Diba? For example, ito yung original territory niya, and then it successfully annexed this territory, and then next, and the next, etc., etc. So yun. So that's necessity or force theory. Paternalistic theory talks about the formation of a state based on the enlargement of the family. Okay, so you have a nucleus family, and then their authority grew and grew either by intermarriage with other groups, okay, either by strength, military strength. But we see the pattern of the power of the state is centralized on the enlargement of a particular family. Okay, so examples of these are governments that are centered on dynasties, clans. So ayan. Social contract. So ayan, the state is formed by contracts, technically by agreements between two states who agreed to unify into a single state. Okay. Ayan. Okay, so some concepts also that we need to determine. All right, okay, before that pala, nga pala, uh, which do you think could explain how the Philippine state, okay, came to be? Okay, did the Philippine state, was the Philippine state formed due to the divine right theory? Was it formed through the necessity or force theory? Through the paternalistic theory or through the social contract theory. Okay, so ano lang, again, some points of reflection lang. Okay, now we proceed with the forms of government. Okay, so the forms of government are categorized into, well, are categorized depending on uh, the nature of the form of government that we are referring to. So there is no single type of government. Okay, a government a government uh, normally has different types based on what context you are referring to. Okay, for example, In this one, we are referring to the number of people exercising power. Okay, how many people are what is the type of government based on the number of people who exercise power? Okay, so we have three major kinds in this category. So you have monarchy, or it's the type of government wherein sovereign power rests in just one person. Okay, from the prefix mono, monarchy. Ayan. So power, sovereign power rests in just one person. Okay? So usually ito yung king in the western context, in Philippine context. So this is what we had when the Philippines when the communities in the Philippines were still in the Baranganic period, or in the pre-colonial period. So in the barangays, diba, you have the datu, okay, who exercise sovereign power. Okay. So there are two types: absolute, limited. So it's a little bit self-explanatory when we say absolute monarchy. So the king or the sovereign has absolute power. So basically, he can do whatever he wants. Okay. Limited monarchy. So um, the exercise of the power of the sovereign is usually should should conform to what is written in the law that they have acknowledged. Okay. Kumbaga, okay, yes, the deciding power still rests in one person, but yun nga, it has to be in line with what is predetermined, okay, by the law or by their constitution. Ayan. Okay, so an aristocracy is a rule by few. Okay. Or I would like to use the term uh, the few who based on specific categories. Okay? Kasi we determine who is these few if they meet certain criteria. Okay? For example, the state is run by people who with the most wealth, or by the wealthiest people. So yeah. Okay, so the criteria of choosing the people who has sovereign power are those who are wealthy. Diba? Those who are filthy rich. Ayan. Okay. Or it can be a rule, or the rulers, or those who run the government are those who are the most intelligent. Okay. So halimbawa, you have to take an exam, and those who scored 95% and above are the ones who has the capacity, or who has the power to govern, or to rule, or to make decisions. Ayan. So it depends on whatever the state will determine to be its criteria. Okay, but usually it's for the most part of history, usually it's those with money, or those with power, or those with military power rather. Yan. So democracy naman, so it's the rule of the many, or uh, sovereign power rests with the people. Okay? So meaning it's the people basically uh, who is the main source of power in the government. Okay? Kaya lang sometimes we are confused with this, because in the government, 'di ba, you see the government that is run by the president, so we see na isang tao lang ang may hawak ng power. But remember, it's the people who put the president there. Okay? So it's the people who is responsible for the power of the president, who is making the decisions on our behalf. That's why we have what we call as a representative or indirect democracy, because we elect a representative to make the decisions for us. Well, because well, halimbawa tayo, there are lots of things that we are busy with. Halimbawa, di ba? So those affairs that affect the entire nation, so we leave the decisions to one person, to one capable person, hopefully. Okay. Now, can the people remove this person from power? Of course, they can because they are the ones who put him in power. So they can take away that power from that person. Okay? And more on this later on when we talk about the constitution of our when we talk about our constitution. But yes, they can remove the person that they have voted for. Okay? Even if it's the president. Right. Direct or pure democracy naman, it's when the people, well, they decide uh tawag dito, they are part of the actual decision making process of the government. Okay? For example, in making laws or in making bills, the people, uh, as in the people, you, if you are a registered voter, you are directly involved in making this particular law, uh, making this particular bill into a law. Okay? So we don't rely on our congressmen or our senators to make decisions for us. So tayo mismo, we are directly involved. Okay? Of course, a lot of them have advantages and disadvantages. Okay? Now, uh, this leads us to points of reflection. Halimbawa, what is the best type of government? Okay, is monarchy the best type of government? Is aristocracy the best type of government? Is a democratic government the best type of government? Okay, so we will answer that later. Kasi nasa first category pa lang tayo. Okay, so again, so what are the types of government based on the number of people exercising sovereign power? So you have monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, democracy. Um, sorry, this is not the answer to what is the best type of government. Okay. Mamaya pa yan. Anyway. Okay, uh, second category of types of government. Okay. Based to the extent of the power exercised by the central or the national government. Okay. So una, we're referring to the number of people who exercise power. This one refers to the extent, okay, of the power of the national government. Okay. So we have two types, unitary and federal. Okay. What is the central government or the national government? So this is the highest office in the government, the central. Okay. So if you're going to relate it to the government that we have now, so this refers to the office of the president. Okay. So in this category, we're determining uh, up to where is the extent of the authority of the president. Okay. In a unitary type of government, okay, so the president oversees both the national and the local affairs. Ayan. Okay. So meaning he involves himself in both affairs that affect the whole nation or the whole country, and he also involves himself in affairs that matters only the locality or the local government. Okay, let me give you an example. Uh, so I live in Angeles City, okay, Pampanga. Uh, During October, so it's the month where we have the most holidays here in Angeles. Okay, we have the Twin Fiestas, okay, La Naval, and Apu, Fiestang Apu Mamakalulu. Okay, and of course, as students, I'm sure you all know na during fiestas or during holidays, Okay, it's almost always mandated that there are no classes. Okay. Now, of course, the mayor actually cannot declare no work or suspension of work or suspension of classes immediately if there is no if there is no immediate concern. For example, typhoon. Ayan. Pag typhoon, syempre, pwede na siyang immediately, he can immediately suspend work or classes. Okay, but for holidays like these, okay, he has to give notice to the president. And the suspension of work or classes is subject to the approval of the president. Okay? That's what we mean when the government or the central government, okay, involves himself in local affairs. Okay, because fiestas here in Angeles are local affairs, di ba? Hindi naman affected ang holidays, or the holidays in Angeles, or the local holidays in Angeles, do not affect in any way whatsoever the lives, or the daily life of the people in Manila. Okay? It's just a local affair. It's for us here in Angeles. Okay? Kaya lang, since the government is unitary, okay, the president bothers himself with the affairs of the local. Okay? Why? Because, well, that's the setup of the unitary. Okay? Some people see that this type of setup is more beneficial to the country. Okay? So, yun. uh, it's a local affair, but the national government still has a hand on it, still has a say in it. Okay. Another example is in the context of budget. In a unitary type of government, there's only one budget for the whole country. Okay. The local government does not have a budget on its own, in the sense na uh, all budget has to come from the national and will be distributed to the different localities. Okay? So that's the setup. Okay, kumbaga, whatever the local, for example, here in Angeles, whatever revenues or income that we have as a city, okay, it's being brought up to the national, and then the national will then redistribute it to the different localities. Okay, that's why in certain occasions during, for example, during emergency funds or in relief, during national disasters or calamities, di ba? That's why the local government cannot immediately act because they are waiting for budgets in terms of big reliefs from the national. Because they don't really have uh, a budget on their own regarding regarding emergency situations. Okay? How different would that be in a federal? Okay, so let's go back to the two situations. In a federal type of government, so in the local holidays here in Angeles, okay, so the approval for the holiday will no longer be dependent on the approval of the president. So the local authority can immediately approve that without can immediately approve that even without the approval of the president, because it's a local affair. Okay. In this type, the central government only oversees matters that will affect the whole nation. Okay? For example, diplomatic affairs. So, yan. So, relations between one country and another country will affect the whole nation. So, that's when the president will step in. But in affairs like in local holidays, okay, so the president will no longer bother himself with that. Okay? Ayun, in the federal also, the local government will have its own budget separate from the national budget. Okay? So it can immediately uh, conduct relief activities. Okay? If there is a catastrophe or an environment or natural disaster that occurred. So yun. So the local government does not need to wait for the national government. All right. Okay. So again, what type of government is best? Is it unitary or is it federal? Okay. So again, the answer later. Okay. All right. So since we now have two categories, so we can now clarify that a government can basically have more than one or two types. Okay? Because there are more than one categories of types of government. For example, a government can be democratic and federal at the same time because democratic and federal belong to two different categories. Okay? Pag democratic kasi, we are referring to the uh, number of people exercising power. In federal, you're talking about the extent of that power. Okay? You can be aristocratic and federal. You can be monarchical and federal. Okay? All right. So that's what we are referring to, or that's what I mean when I was saying that there are different categories in the types of government. Okay. So they are differentiated into categories, and then each category would have their specific types. Okay, last. Ay, yun pala. So, ayan, this is an example of the difference between the federal and the difference between the national and the local government in a federal type. Okay. So ayan. So in the local or in the state, this in, if I'm not mistaken, this is an example in the states. Okay. So can establish and maintain schools, local governments, regulate business within the state. It can make marriage laws. That's why in some that's why if we are federal, it's possible that there are some states that can legalize same-sex marriage, and there could be some states that will continue to uh, not legalize same-sex marriage. So that's a high possibility. Okay. Halimbawa din, there can also be some states where medical marijuana is legal. Okay, and there can be some states where it is still illegal. So, ganyan. If we are in a federal type of government. Okay, ano naman yung affairs ng national? Okay, so declaration of war, yan, maintain of the armed forces, and standardization of the value of money. Okay, for example, 1 peso in Manila will still have the same value of 1 peso in Baguio, halimbawa. Okay. Of course, it's a national affair. Okay. All right, last category. Okay, so as to the relationship between the executive and the legislative branches. All right. So in the government, we have three branches, main branches. So you have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch. Okay, start with these three branches. The term are anchored on their functions with regards to law and the practice of law. Okay, so of course, how is this? So we have uh, the making of the law, okay, the enactment of the law, and the interpretation of the law, whether it is constitutional or unconstitutional, or whether a person has violated the law or not. Okay. Okay. So the legislative branch deals with the making of the law. So it's the one that makes the laws. Okay. The executive branch executes or enacts the law. It puts the law into practice. Okay. The judicial branch interprets the law. So he's the one who says that the law is constitutional or unconstitutional. He is the one who says that this person has violated the law or did not violate the law and is therefore innocent. Okay. So this last category talks about the relationship between the executive and the legislative, the law enacting and the lawmaking. Okay, in a parliamentary type of government, okay, so the executive is answerable to the legislative, meaning the person who enacts the law is responsible to the people who make the law. Okay, to put it simpler, for example, ito yung gumagawa ng law. These are the lawmaking people. This is the lawmaking body. Okay? The people who will enact the law basically came from the people who make the law. Okay? So yan. So this is the lawmaking body. Sabi, hey, let's choose the person who will enact the law. So we choose this one. Yay! And so yan. So he became the executive. Okay? Now, what happens when these people, the people who make the law, are no longer happy with what he or she is doing? Okay? So they have the power to replace him with another. Pinili nila ito. Ayan. Okay? Because this person, the executive, is responsible to the legislative. Okay? He is directly accountable to these people. Kasi it's these people who chose this one. Okay? It's the legislative who chose the executive. Okay? That's why if the executive is not functioning properly, they can immediately uh, change him to someone who is more efficient. Okay? While in a presidential, so this one is independent from this one. Okay? How is that so? It's because the people directly elects this one, not these. Kasi in the parliamentary, the people will elect this one and then this one will choose this one. Okay? But in the presidential, the people will elect this one and they will also elect this one. So this one, the executive is now answerable to the people. Okay? So the executive is now accountable directly to the people. That's why even if these people uh, are not satisfied with this one, with the executive, they cannot do anything because but they have no power, they have no authority over the executive. Okay, clear. So uh, so that's what we mean when we say the executive is independent from the legislative. Okay. All right. So again, we won't really deal much with this one. Pero yun, since we now know a little bit of background between these types, let me go back to the question a while ago. Ayan. So, sorry. Ayan. Okay. So, this is what I was referring to in the parliament. And the prime minister is taken from the members of the parliament. This one, okay. The president is elected by the people, and the department heads, okay, are appointed by the president. Dito, hindi eh. The department heads are from the legislative. Okay? So, yun. All right. So, going back to the question a while ago, which type of government is best? Okay? Which among the three types of government uh, is best? Democracy, aristocracy, and monarchy. And then which which of the two types of government based on the extent of the power of the central government is best? Is it federal or is it unitary? Okay, and which of these two, the one that you can see right now, these two, and which of them is the best? Is parliamentary better or is the presidential better? Okay, so we cannot really answer this question definitively. Why? Because as I have said a while ago, these types of government has their own advantages and disadvantages. Okay? Therefore, The question or the answer to the question of the best type of government is dependent on the circumstances. Okay? That's why it's more important to look into the advantages and disadvantages of these types of government in relation to the situation or the circumstance of the state. Okay? We won't really deal much with the advantages and disadvantages with the uh, with the technology available to us now, so you can easily look for their advantages and disadvantages. Okay, but what's important to remember is that the type of government should follow the circumstance. Okay, the type of government should follow whatever the people will need. Okay, because the people's necessities, the people, what the people needs, what the people requires is more important than maintaining this type of government uh, for the sake of permanence, or for the sake of not going through the difficulties of establishing a new government. Okay, because if the government is no longer functioning properly, and because of the type of government that it has in relation to the circumstance, then it's time to change the government, the type of government rather. Okay, of course, that's the number one. That's the number one consideration that we are asking. Is the government still efficient in providing the needs of the people? Okay, is the type of government that we have right now still efficient in providing for the needs of the people? Yun. Okay. If not, if it's no longer efficient despite the capabilities of the people running the government, then it's high time that we change the government. Kasi hindi, you have capable people in the government, but they are not efficient in what you call this. They are not efficient in providing the needs of the people. Then why are you still why are you still clinging on to that type of government, diba? So you have to change the setup. You're not saying that you abandon the people, but you have to change the setup. You have to change the system in a way. Okay, because again, not all systems are perfect, and there will come a time that the system will no longer be efficient to suit the needs of the people. So we always have to be aware of that. Okay, all right. So having said that, uh, I thank you for listening, and I hope that you have learned something from this lecture. So again, let's always be let's always be aware of the circumstances of the country. Okay, and let's also be aware with how the government is functioning in terms of providing for the necessities of the people. Okay, so we can determine, okay, whether there's a need to change something, or we can still go on with the current setup. Okay, so with that, again, I thank you. I hope you learned something, and always stay safe.